we're definitely dealing with a crisis of unparalleled proportions as the new unemployment numbers just came in, and they are as bad as we told you they would be. And of course, many economic experts got it wrong. We're going to be talking about that, plus a lot more with, of course, Tim Pritchett, the Liberty Advisor, plus a lot more when it comes to all the latest economic news happening right now in the United States. And of course, everyone's eyeballs are on these unemployment numbers. And of course, it's a record 6.6 million Americans that just filed for unemployment last week. The previous week before that, it was 3.3 million, leading now to the total of 10 million Americans that are now jobless. And again, we have to understand here, these are still just the initial numbers. This is just the beginning, because it takes some states 2 to 3 weeks, sometimes even longer, to process a lot of these claims. And with this lockdown being expected to last a lot longer, you can only expect the devastation to be forthcoming with this situation unfolding right in front of us. And again, I have to point out to what is the CNBC article that was released before these numbers came out, and they were saying many economics experts claim to these numbers to be about 4 to 5 million people. That's what they were predicting that was going to happen. Well, no, it's 10 million. It's a lot worse, and it's going to get a lot worse from here. Tim, what's your reaction to this kind of news? 10 million unemployed Americans, which again is just the beginning here.
Yeah, well, I think the important point is that this is just the beginning. I mean, a lot of businesses, the last thing you want to do is have to lay somebody off, because it takes so much time, energy, effort, resources, money to have to train somebody and then ramp things back up. So that's, having to lay somebody off is a last resort effort. And so we'll probably end up seeing, and hopefully I'm not right in this, but I think it's very, very obvious what's going to happen is that, the month of April is going to be probably even more of a bloodbath than we saw in March. Now, I hope that's not the case, and maybe these stimulus checks can, help things out. But, I really am, doubtful as what can happen. And, just as a sign of the times of just how bad things are getting, we're having banks right now who are actually going ahead, and the Fed has actually eased capital requirements for big banks. Now, it's important to point out that they have already gotten to the point where banks don't have to reserve anything in the reserve requirement for our own capital deposits. Now, there's other things in terms of like different leverage that they utilize, that they need to have a certain amount in, safer, and I'll, say that in air quotes, safer treasury bills. But then the Federal Reserve, I almost said federal government, but it's not the federal government, has come ahead and said, actually, you don't have to do that. And so one trick that the Fed could pull, looking at zero hedge right now, is that, actually we're not looking at zero hedge right now, now we are, is that the Fed could ease the tension in the treasury market to potentially unlock hundreds of billions of dollars in new lending capacity among U.S. commercial banks, was to exclude treasuries and deposit from the Fed's much maligned supplementary leverage ratio rule, which forces banks to hold ultra-safe, and again, that's sort of, anyone listening to this, I'll say that in air quotes, ultra-safe treasuries and or deposits on their books, which are traditionally viewed by the Fed as less risky than loans, or also have to suffer a capital surcharge. But specifically, they were told they had to hold 3%, and now 3% is too much. And so, just like, what usually happens, yesterday I was on a podcast with Ernest Hancock, and he was asking about what rules typically happen traditionally. But the problem is what happens traditionally and what happens during a crisis are two different things, because they always throw out the rule book during a crisis, just like GM during 2008 when the bondholders should have gotten absolutely shellacked and gotten and the government came in and essentially sort of like nationalized GM, and then GM took some of that money and moved plants offshore. No big surprise there. But yeah, this is some of the other things I wanted to mention that we see an article coming out of actually this one's coming out of Gold Money. It's called "Credit Crisis Averted, but now a monetary crisis has been initiated." And I think that's very important distinction, because we may have helped avert one thing, but now we may have set in the wheels in motion for something that, in my opinion, is even worse. And going on from the article, just a week ago, we published a report with the title "What is Holding Gold Back?" That was March 20th. In that report, we analyzed the odd downward move in gold since early March amidst a global pandemic, crashing equities, unchecked central bank intervention, and the prospect for the largest fiscal stimulus bills the world has ever seen. We conclude that the main reason for this sell-off, and they're talking about in gold, is a sharp rise in interest rate expectations was temporary, and that could turn on a dime. And we do see here, we're taking a look at the 10-year Treasury inflation-protected securities. And at one point, towards the end of February, beginning of March, it was actually showing inflation expectations were going to be negative 0.6, which is indicative of deflation. Somebody scroll down on the screen so that way you guys can see that. And yes, these conditions have been changing. One big change is what we see here is the Federal Reserve's balance sheet. They added $1.1 trillion just in the span of a month, which is just absolutely incredible action of what's going on here. Some other things that are going on here. We got the banks.
Wait, before we get into that, but just coming back into these kind of unemployment numbers, I also wanted to point out, this is more important than ever because, again, people aren't working. The economy is not moving. Before we get into all the other aspects here, these numbers, again, were not only lowballed by the so-called economic experts, but they're going to be far worse, mainly because if you really think about it, many local state governments don't have the capabilities to all work from home. So a lot of the government offices, a lot of the fat cat bureaucrats who process these unemployment claims, well, they're not in the offices. And many states are reporting that they're having a hard time filing a lot of these claims and actually putting them officially on the record. So again, these numbers are going to be way higher. I know a lot of people who are in this flex thinking somehow that things are going to come back to normal in a week or two because, again, Donald Trump said that maybe by Easter their economy is going to reopen. And again, we called it here. We were saying that's way, way too optimistic. But we're looking for a long, long, long time of pain.
Well, don't tell that to Ben Bernanke.
For a lot of people. Tim?
Don't tell that to Ben Bernanke. Ben Bernanke said this is just going to be a snowstorm. I'm from Syracuse, New York, which is actually the snow capital of the country for any city over 100,000 people. So I know something or two about snowstorms. And this is, guess what? A snowstorm shuts you down for like a week or two. Well, in Syracuse, it takes like an act of God. You take literally, I guess, 3 feet of snow getting
but
dumped.
Other things that I'm seeing that are kind of really important here. Now the professional economic experts that lowballed these numbers, now they're saying that the end of April, this number will be about 20 million individuals claiming unemployment. And again, that's a very bare minimum, and I'm going to call it here, that's going to be lower than the actual numbers. The actual numbers, in my opinion, are going to be a lot higher. And the second question, how is the Department of Labor, how is the state going to be able to pay unemployment benefits to so many people that are absolutely out of work and are claiming this? Again, this is a trajectory that is going to be very, very painful. You were just talking about the metal market, the gold and silver market. When you look at that market, a lot of people see it as a safe haven away from the dollar. I worked with a company since 2013. I work with them now. We have a website called getyoursilvernow.com, getyoursilvernow.com. And I started, working with them again just a few weeks ago. Now their orders are literally 12 weeks back. 12 weeks back. And, silver that usually goes for $12 an ounce has a 50% premium because no one could get it because everyone's trying to buy it up right now to look as a safe haven to the dollar, which of course many people see inevitably going down, even though it's being very supported by the world market. How do you see this kind of trajectory all kind of playing itself out here? Because it's definitely unpredictable. The rule books are out, especially during this crisis, and we don't know what the Federal Reserve is doing, but they're definitely acting secretive, and they're definitely going to be bailing out more of their buddies. So, Tim, go ahead.
Well, not to make light of the situation, but my Trump money gone 2020 did arrive yesterday, which I was too busy to figure it out. But oh, here we go.
Mine did too, and I literally have it like being washed, cleaned right now.
So I actually you got to watch. So I've got my Trump $20 bills over here because he's the money man. That we're just going to print money to solve everything. You want to know how we're going to pay the unemployment benefits? We're going to print money. How we're going to pay for the pensions when they fail? We're going to print money. I think that one of the big things to look out for and mark it down right now is when the Illinois pension fund eventually blows up. Now, before all this, they were only 25% funded to begin with, and those were based off the BS funding numbers that they came up with. And believe it or not, my Facebook memory from 1 year ago today was when I accidentally discovered how the government actually forces everyone who has a pension to actually basically dramatically overstate those numbers. So I found this out on accident. It was 1 year ago today, where the government, what they do is they take a trailing 25-year basically interest rate. So, without getting too technical here. And so the trailing 25-year rate on the Treasury is like 5 or 6%, but a trailing, 1 or 2 year rate would be, closer to 1, or now would be like 0 looking going forward. So the pensions are literally mandated to say that their bonds are going to earn about 6% when their bonds are probably going to earn closer to 2. And so even off these BS numbers, they're showing that they're only at 25% funding. This is before the crisis. And so now, Illinois is going to be the first one to go. And then, then how are they going to pay their police? And how are they going to pay, the fire department? How are they going to pay? And then so at this point, in Phoenix, where I'm coming from right now, they actually, not technically in Peoria, but in Phoenix, they actually voted to make it so that way the first people that get paid, no matter what, out of any money out of the budget, are the police. And so literally the police have a gun to the citizens' heads and saying, you guys either pay us first and you pay our pensions first. And it doesn't matter if, our pensions got greedy and made bad decisions and blew up. We're the ones who get protected first. And so, this is a message that we've had all along here, is that people need to be self-sufficient, self-reliant, because when there is a crisis, the police are going to be there taking care of their own family, and rightfully so at that point, because when things get really bad, but one thing,
or most of them are going to be sick, just like the NYPD. The NYPD is already facing 15% of their force being sick. 15%. And again, the officers and National Guardsmen will be the ones most impacted by this initially, right after, of course, the medical professionals, because the police officers and National Guardsmen, they're doing really stupid things like going door to door in Rhode Island. And what happens when you go door to door, having as much contact with as many people as possible? What do you think is going to happen during a pandemic when that happens? Well, it's going to unfold what's unfolding now in New York City, with a large number of the police officers being unable to work. And now police officer shifts have been expanded from 8 hours to 12 hours. And again, that's still, not enough, because again, more officers will get sick. And the situation in New York City is truly one that is very, very worrisome.
Yeah, and you've got people here, at least in Arizona, where we just went on some sort of lockdown a couple of days ago, supposedly, and apparently all the liberals are getting all mad about how come these rules don't have more teeth in it, and what we need basically you to be put in jail if you go outside, and so they want more men with guns dictating things. But one thing that never
we definitely don't want that, but we definitely want people taking the situation seriously and protecting themselves and their family members, and protecting individuals who might not have a secure immune system, might not have the best health. Just being conscious of those people is something that I think we should advocate for. And the more police officers that go around, the more they spread this pandemic sickness. Like, it's just stupid and idiotic. And again, we shouldn't be giving up our rights because of this thing. Tim, now there's a lot of things to talk about, especially with the kind of stocks and the Dow kind of opening flat. There's a lot of news in oil. There's a lot of news with the auto sales. Should we continue this on to the second video? Because I know we got a lot to say about the economy. Would you be okay with that?
Yeah, I'd be okay with that. We're at 13 minutes now, so I think
so we're gonna continue this conversation, talk about oil, talk about auto sales, talk about, of course, the stocks in the next video. Stay tuned for more here on Change the News.